Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, August 1993. The California night had settled over the stadium like a blanket of anticipation, wrapping 50,000 souls in a collective dream. The Dangerous World Tour had been crossing continents for nearly a year, but tonight felt different. There was electricity in the air, a current running through the crowd that seemed to make the very foundations of the massive structure vibrate with expectation. The stage stood illuminated against the darkness, a technological marvel of lights, platforms, and screens that would soon showcase the most famous entertainer on the planet. Mothers clutched their children's hands. Teenagers trembled with excitement. Grown men and women who had saved for months to afford these tickets stood shoulder to shoulder, strangers united by a singular devotion. The crowd had been waiting for hours, their patience stretched taut like a bowstring. And then, darkness. A collective gasp rolled through the stadium as the lights cut out, 50,000 people inhaling as one. For a moment, there was nothing but darkness and the sound of breathing, a living organism of humanity waiting in perfect suspense. And then, a single spotlight pierced the blackness, revealing a silhouette that needed no introduction. The figure stood motionless, head bowed, one arm raised to the heavens in a pose that had become iconic across the globe. The crowd erupted, a tidal wave of sound that seemed to shake the stars themselves. The king of pop had arrived. The first notes of Jam pulsated through the stadium, and Michael Jackson exploded into motion, his body becoming an instrument of precision and grace that defied human capability. Every movement was calculated, every gesture deliberate, yet somehow imbued with a spontaneity that made each moment feel unrehearsed and intimate, as if he were performing for each individual rather than a sea of faces. The set progressed with the momentum of a freight train, each song flowing into the next in a masterclass of showmanship. Jam became "Wanna Be Startin' Somethin'," which transformed into human nature, the pace alternating between frenetic energy and soulful vulnerability. Michael moved across the stage like a man possessed, moonwalking, spinning, defying gravity in ways that still, despite decades of witnessing his magic, left the audience breathless. Smooth Criminal brought the crowd to a fever pitch, Michael and his dancers executing the famous lean that seemed to break the very laws of physics. Sweat glistened on his face under the harsh stage lights, but his energy never waned, his voice never faltered. He was 3 songs into Beat It, the iconic guitar riff reverberating through the stadium, when it happened. The moment that would be recounted in newspapers, on television programs, and eventually across the nascent internet, becoming one of those crystallized memories that define not just a concert, but an era. Security at a Michael Jackson concert was notoriously tight, a necessary precaution for a man whose fame had transcended normal boundaries of celebrity to become something almost mythological. Dark-suited men with earpieces and vigilant eyes formed a human barrier between the stage and the crowd, scanning constantly for potential threats. But they hadn't counted on the determination of 10-year-old Miguel Sanchez, a boy from East Los Angeles whose single mother had worked double shifts for 6 months to afford these tickets as a birthday present. Miguel had been obsessed with Michael since the age of 4, learning every dance move, memorizing every lyric, his bedroom a shrine to his idol. When his mother had presented him with the tickets, he had wept with joy, counting down the days with the kind of pure anticipation that only children can truly feel. And now, watching his hero perform just 50 yards away, something had snapped in Miguel's mind, a moment of clarity, of destiny, of now or never courage. While his mother was distracted by the spectacle on stage, Miguel had slipped away, working his way through the crowd toward the security barrier. And then, seeing a momentary gap when the guards were focused on a disturbance elsewhere, he had made his move, ducking under the barrier, sprinting across the no-man's land between crowd and stage, scrambling up onto the platform before anyone could react. The security team spotted him immediately, of course. 3 guards broke formation and converged on the small figure who had suddenly appeared on stage left, running toward Michael with his arms outstretched. The crowd nearest the stage noticed first, their cries of alarm spreading through the stadium like ripples in a pond. Michael, deep in the performance zone, continued dancing, unaware of the approaching child or the security response. The lead guard reached Miguel first, his large hands closing around the boy's thin shoulders, ready to remove him from the stage with the efficient, discreet professionalism that was their hallmark. The music continued, but a murmur was building in the crowd, a collective tension as they witnessed the small drama unfolding. And then Michael turned, saw the commotion, and in an instant took in the scene. The small boy, tears streaming down his face, being firmly restrained by the much larger security guard. What happened next occurred so quickly that many in the audience would later debate exactly what they had seen. Michael raised his hand in a clear gesture to stop, his voice cutting through the music with a command that brooked no argument. Wait! The music faltered as the band registered the disruption. The security guard hesitated, still holding Miguel's shoulders, but no longer moving to remove him. Michael approached, his face unreadable behind the curtain of his hair and the distance that separated him from most of the audience. He crouched down to the boy's level, placing himself eye to eye with the child who had risked everything for this moment. The stadium held its breath. 50,000 people frozen in collective anticipation. The music had stopped completely now, the silence almost deafening after the constant sound. No one could hear the words exchanged between the superstar and the child, but they could see Miguel's face transform from fear to disbelief to ecstatic joy. And then Michael did something that no one expected. He stood, took the boy's hand in his own gloved one, and led him to center stage. The crowd roared its approval, the sound of physical force that seemed to press against the skin. Michael raised his free hand, asking for silence, and remarkably, it came. 50,000 people quieting at his command, the kind of control over a crowd that few performers in history have achieved. "What's your name?" Michael asked, his voice echoing through the now silent stadium, the microphone pinned to his costume, picking up his words clearly. "Miguel," came the reply, so soft that the microphone barely caught it, but Miguel's name rippled through the crowd nonetheless. "Miguel has shown incredible bravery tonight," Michael continued, his voice taking on the gentle, slightly childlike quality that emerged when he spoke in public. "And I think bravery should be rewarded, don't you?" The crowd's response was deafening, a wall of sound that made Miguel visibly flinch before breaking into a smile so radiant it seemed to generate its own light. What followed became the stuff of concert legend. Michael whispered something to one of his dancers, who quickly disappeared backstage, returning moments later with what appeared to be a small duffel bag. From it, Michael withdrew a fedora. Not just any fedora, but the specific one he had worn during the Smooth Criminal number earlier in the show. With ceremonial gravity, he placed it on Miguel's head, where it immediately slipped down over the boy's eyes, far too large for his small head. The crowd laughed, a warm sound of shared joy rather than mockery, as Miguel pushed the hat back, his face a picture of disbelief and delight. But Michael wasn't finished. "Do you know how to dance, Miguel?" he asked. The boy nodded vigorously, too overwhelmed to speak. "Would you show us?" Another nod, even more emphatic. Michael turned to his band, made a circular gesture with his finger, the universal sign to pick it up again, and pointed to the lead guitarist. The opening riff of "Beat It" filled the stadium once more, and what happened next will be described by the Los Angeles Times the following day as perhaps the most heartwarming moment in pop concert history. Miguel, emboldened by his hero's encouragement and the roar of the crowd, began to dance. Not the awkward, self-conscious movements one might expect from a child thrust into the spotlight, but a surprisingly skillful imitation of Michael's own distinctive style. The moonwalk, the spin, even a credible attempt at the more complex footwork that had become Michael's trademark. The crowd's reaction was instantaneous and overwhelming. Cheers, applause, and an outpouring of collective emotion that seemed to physically lift the stadium. If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible moments from Michael's life and career. Your support helps us continue to share these powerful memories with fans around the world. Michael watched for a moment, his expression visible now on the massive screens that flanked the stage, a mixture of surprise, delight, and something deeper, more complex, a recognition perhaps of himself in this child. Then, with the timing of a born showman, he joined in, mirroring Miguel's movements, creating a dance duet that blurred the lines between megastar and young fan. For 2 minutes that stretched into eternity for Miguel and the mesmerized crowd, they danced together, the king of pop and the boy from East Los Angeles, connected by nothing more than a shared love of music and movement. As the song reached its climax, Michael executed one of his famous spins, then gestured to Miguel, who attempted the same, wobbling slightly but managing to complete the turn without falling, the oversized fedora somehow staying on his head. The crowd's response was electric, a tsunami of approval that washed over the stadium. Mothers wiped away tears. Hardened security guards found themselves smiling despite their professional demeanor. Strangers embraced, united by the pure, unfiltered joy of the moment they were witnessing. As the final notes of Beat It faded, Michael knelt down once more beside Miguel. He removed the rhinestone-studded glove from his right hand, the iconic accessory that had become as much a part of his image as the moonwalk itself, and with deliberate ceremony, placed it in Miguel's small palm, closing the boy's fingers around it. The gesture was visible on the screens, and a collective gasp rippled through the stadium. To those who understood Michael Jackson, who had followed his career and his carefully constructed public persona, the significance was clear. The glove was not merely a costume piece. It was a symbol, a totem, a piece of the mythology that surrounded him. And he had given it, willingly and publicly, to a child who had dared to dream. Michael embraced Miguel, whispered something in his ear that made the boy's eyes widen, then straightened and addressed the crowd once more. "Let's hear it for Miguel," he called, raising the boy's hand high in the air. The response was thunderous, a standing ovation that seemed to make the very air vibrate. After allowing the moment to breathe, to imprint itself on the memory of everyone present, Michael nodded to a security guard, not the one who had intercepted Miguel, but another, a woman with kind eyes who approached with a smile rather than the stern professionalism of earlier. "This nice lady is going to take you back to your mother," Michael explained to Miguel, his voice still carrying through the stadium sound system. "But I want you to keep that glove and hat safe. They're yours now." Miguel nodded, clearly fighting back tears of joy. The security guard took his hand, but before leading him away, Miguel turned back, wrapped his arms around Michael's waist in a fierce hug that caught the superstar momentarily off guard. The crowd's reaction was immediate, a collective ah that seemed to emerge from 50,000 throats simultaneously. For a moment, Michael seemed frozen, his body language betraying surprise. Then his arms came around the boy, returning the embrace with equal intensity. Those closest to the stage would later swear they had seen tears in Michael's eyes, though this would be impossible to confirm from official footage. The moment stretched, crystallized, became something more than just an interaction between performer and fan. It was a glimpse behind the curtain, a rare moment of genuine human connection in a performance that was otherwise meticulously choreographed and controlled. Finally, gently, Michael disentangled himself from Miguel's embrace. He brushed the hair back from the boy's forehead in a gesture of almost paternal tenderness, then nodded to the security guard. As Miguel was led off stage, the fedora still perched precariously on his head, the glove clutched tightly in his hand. Michael turned back to the crowd. There was a moment of silence, heavy with emotion, as 50,000 people and one global superstar collectively processed what they had just experienced. Then, with the instincts of a performer who understood exactly how to channel and transform emotional energy, Michael nodded to his band once more. The opening beats of Billie Jean pulsated through the stadium, and the show continued. But something had changed. There was a new energy in Michael's performance, a looseness, a joy that hadn't been there before. The carefully constructed walls between performer and audience had been momentarily breached, and in that breach, something magical had occurred. The remainder of the concert unfolded with the precision and spectacle that were hallmarks of a Michael Jackson production. Billie Jean gave way to Thriller, complete with the iconic choreography that had revolutionized music videos a decade earlier. Man in the Mirror provided a moment of reflection and collective emotion. Black or White brought a message of unity and acceptance that resonated through the diverse crowd. But throughout it all, there was an undercurrent, a shared knowledge among everyone present that they had witnessed something rare and precious. A genuine moment of humanity from a man who had become almost mythological in his fame. As the concert drew to its inevitable close, as the final encore concluded and the lights began to brighten, as 50,000 people prepared to return to their regular lives, carrying with them the memory of this night, Michael addressed the crowd one final time. "Thank you, Los Angeles," he said, his voice softened now, tinged with the exhaustion that came from giving everything on stage for over 2 hours. "Thank you for your love, your energy, your acceptance. Tonight has been special." He paused, and even from a distance, even through the massive screens that projected his image throughout the stadium, something vulnerable and genuine could be seen in his expression. "Tonight, Miguel reminded me why I do this. Why music matters. It's about connection. It's about joy. It's about love." Another pause, longer this time. If you've enjoyed tonight, if any moment has touched your heart, please share that feeling. Subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment about what moved you most. Your support means everything. The words were simple, direct, lacking the polish of a scripted statement. And perhaps because of that, they landed with greater impact. This wasn't the global superstar speaking. This was the man behind the myth, reaching out with genuine gratitude. The aftermath of that night would ripple outward in ways that no one could have predicted. The story of Miguel and Michael would appear in newspapers across the country, a rare piece of unambiguously positive press for a man who had begun to experience the darker side of fame scrutiny. Footage of their dance, captured on thousands of personal cameras despite the venue's nominal restrictions on recording devices, would circulate first through fan networks and later, as technology evolved, become one of the earliest viral videos of the internet age. Miguel himself would give interviews, his youthful exuberance and obvious adoration for Michael providing a counter-narrative to the increasingly suspicious tone of media coverage. The fedora and glove would eventually be authenticated by Michael's team and would become among the most valuable pieces of Jackson memorabilia, though Miguel would refuse countless offers to sell them, their value to him transcending mere money. 27 years later, on a quiet afternoon in June 2020, an older Miguel Sanchez stood in his modest home in the suburbs of Los Angeles. At 47, his face carried the lines of a life fully lived, of joys and sorrows, triumphs and failures. But his eyes remained those of the 10-year-old boy who had dared to rush a stage and found himself dancing with his idol. In a custom-built display case in his living room, illuminated by subtle lighting, sat a fedora and a single rhinestone-studded glove, preserved not just as memorabilia of a global superstar, but as totems of a moment when childhood dreams had manifested into reality. Miguel's own children, now teenagers, had grown up with the story, had seen the grainy footage countless times, had rolled their eyes good-naturedly at their father's oft-repeated tale. But they understood its importance, its centrality to who their father was. And they understood something else, too, something that Miguel had tried to teach them from their earliest years, that sometimes courage is rewarded in ways you can never anticipate, that sometimes heroes prove themselves worthy of adoration, that sometimes a single moment of connection can echo through a lifetime, can shape a soul, can remind us all of our shared humanity. Miguel gently touched the glass of the display case, a gesture of reverence and remembrance. In that quiet moment, across time and space, across life and death, the boy and the king of pop remained connected by a dance, by a gift, by a moment of grace in a world that too often lacks it.